Have you ever seen a son collecting terrifying evidence against his own mother? Especially when that evidence shows his beautiful mother cheating on his own father. I have gathered a great deal of proof against her, and I am going to expose it with a heart full of pain. One of the scenes recorded by the cameras I installed is something so disturbing that, if I showed it to my father, he might die from the shock. That man who once ruled the entire town, my father, was slowly destroyed from the inside by the behavior of this woman, my own mother. Mornings in that house felt heavier than nights. I usually woke before the alarm, staring at the pale line of light creeping across the wall. My chest felt tight before my feet even touched the floor. Some days my hands tingled like my body was warning me to be careful. Before anything else, I need to tell you who I am. La full name Aaron Miles, the age of 31, the small hometown de city, Brookfield, a quiet town where news travels faster than truth, a one-core personality trait patient, a one-life roll records clerk at the municipal office. I had always been patient. Too patient, according to my mom. She used to say patience was another word for weakness. I never argued. I learned early that silence kept the peace, even when it hurt. I got dressed quietly and went downstairs. The kitchen smelled like coffee and disinfectant. My mom sat at the table with a neat stack of folders, her phone beside her. She looked calm, organized, in control. "You're awake early," she said without lifting her eyes. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. She nodded. Like that explained everything about me. I poured coffee, noticing my hand shake slightly as I lifted the mug. The warmth didn't reach my fingers. She noticed and frowned. "You should get that checked," she said. Always so tense. Before I could answer, she smiled at her phone. A private smile. One I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. My stomach tightened. I sat across from her. The chair felt harder than usual, the silence stretched. I waited for her to ask about my day, my work, anything. She didn't. Instead, she gathered the folders and said, "These are important," she said. "Don't touch them." "I wasn't going to," I replied. She paused, then looked at me with a tired expression. "You always take things personally." Her words landed softly but left a bruise. I swallowed and nodded. That was easier. Later that morning I passed her in the hallway. She was on the phone, her voice low. "I told you, he doesn't know," she said. She saw me and turned away, ending the call. Her face hardened. "You shouldn't listen to other people's conversations," she said. "Wasn't?" I replied, my throat dry. She sighed, like I had disappointed her again. "You imagine problems where aren't any." I left the house with that sentence echoing in my head. At work, I stared at files all day, numbers blurring together. My shoulders ached. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. That evening, I returned home to find my mom laughing with a neighbor in the living room. Her voice sounded lighter, younger. When she noticed me, the laughter stopped. "This is Aaron," she said briefly. "He works a lot." The neighbor smiled politely. I felt invisible standing there. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. My chest felt heavy. I pressed my palm against it, trying to breathe evenly. Something in that house had shifted, and whatever it was, my mom was making sure I stayed on the outside of it. Before my father got sick, our house felt balanced. Not perfect, but steady. He was the kind of man who didn't speak much, but when he did, his words carried weight. People in Brookfield respected him. They trusted him. At home, he moved slowly but confidently, like he knew exactly where he stood. When his health began to fail, everything changed in quiet steps. At first, my mom acted caring. She took control of appointments, medication schedules, phone calls. She spoke for him when he grew tired. Everyone praised her devotion. I did too, at the beginning. I wanted to believe she was protecting him. But protection slowly turned into control. She started answering his phone before he could reach it. She told visitors he was resting when he wasn't. Papers began appearing on the dining table late night. Already signed, already finalized. When I asked questions, she said I was stressing him. The first painful realization came one evening when I heard her laughing softly in the living room. It was late. The lights were dim. I had gone downstairs for water and froze when I heard her voice. "You don't have to worry," she said quietly. "He believes me." There was a pause. Then a man's voice responded, low and familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. My heart started beating too fast. I stood there, holding my breath, my hand tight around the glass. When she noticed me, she ended the call immediately. "What are you doing standing there?" she snapped. "I was just getting water." I said. She looked at me like I had interrupted something important. You always listen where you don't belong. That night, I lay awake, my chest tight, replaying her words. He believes me. I felt a slow fear settle in. Not sharp, not sudden. Heavy. The second realization came weeks later. I was helping my father into his chair when he mentioned a document he couldn't find. An account he said was supposed to be shared. He looked confused, embarrassed. I brought it up to my mom later. I tried to stay calm. Why isn't my name on these anymore? I asked. She didn't hesitate. Because you never handled responsibility well, she said. Your father agrees. The room felt smaller. My ears rang. I searched her face for hesitation, for guilt. There was none. That's not what he said before. I replied. She crossed her arms. Before doesn't matter anymore. From that point on, she erased me piece by piece. She stopped mentioning me in conversations with relatives. She corrected people when they asked about my future, saying I was still finding myself. She told my father I was overwhelmed, unstable, better kept away from decisions. I felt it in small moments, the way she spoke over me. The way she changed subjects when I entered the room. The way my father looked me with uncertainty now, like he wasn't sure who to trust. At night, I lay in bed listening to the house settle, my body tense, my thoughts racing. I pressed my hands into the mattress, trying to ground myself. I wasn't being pushed out all at once. I was being quietly erased. And the turning point didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came with an invitation. My mom told me there would be a small family meeting one evening. Her tone was neutral, almost polite, like she was doing me a favor by informing me. Just a few things to clear up, she said. You should be there. The living room felt different that night. Chairs were arranged carefully. Papers were stacked on the coffee table. My aunts and uncles sat quietly, their hands folded, eyes moving between me and my mom. My father sat in his chair near the window, looking tired, smaller than I remembered him. My chest tightened as I sat down. My palms were damp. I wiped them on my pants without anyone noticing. My mom stood and began speaking. She talked about responsibility, about planning ahead, about how illness changes things. Her voice was calm, measured, the same voice she used when she wanted people to trust her. Then she began naming decisions. Accounts adjusted. Authority reassigned. Legal protections updated. I waited to hear my name. It never came. Instead, she said, these changes reflect what's best for the family going forward. Something inside me dropped. I cleared my throat. Where do I fit into this? The room went quiet. I felt every eye turn toward me. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. My mom looked at me with a soft, practiced expression. We didn't think it would be healthy for you to be involved right now. What does that mean? I asked. My voice shook despite my effort to steady it. She sighed gently, like a concerned parent. You've been under a lot of stress. You imagine problems. We don't want to overwhelm you. A few relatives nodded. No one spoke up for me. I glanced at my father. He avoided my eyes. My throat felt tight. My fingers curled into my palms. I wanted to explain, to remind him of conversations we'd had before, plans he had made. But the words stuck. The room felt heavy. Like the air itself was pressing down on me. After the meeting, people left quietly. Polite goodbyes. Softaid seated, staring at the papers on the table. My mom began gathering them. You didn't need to say that. I told her, my voice low. She paused and looked at me. Her expression changed. No warmth. No concern. I said what was necessary, she replied. You should learn when to stay silent. That night I locked myself in my room. My breathing was shallow. My head ached. I paced back and forth, replaying every word she had spoken, every look on my relatives' faces. I opened my laptop, searching for reassurance, for something solid. That's when I remembered the old security system. The one my father had installed years ago after a break and scare. Cameras in common areas. Storage synced to a drive he rarely accessed now. My hands shook as I logged slowly dates, times. Short clips. At first, I told myself I was just checking. Just making sure nothing was wrong. Then I opened one file. My stomach turned, I closed it, my heart racing. Then opened it again to be sure. The footage was clear. Too clear. I leaned back in my chair, my chest tight, my mouth dry. One of the recordings showed something so disturbing, so undeniable, that I knew instantly my father couldn't see it yet. If he did, it might break him. I sat there in the dark, the glow of the screen reflecting off my hands, realizing that my mom hadn't just pushed me aside. She had built an entire life behind our backs. And now I was standing at the edge of a truth that could destroy everything. I didn't yet know how far she had already gone. Sleep stopped coming after that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my eyes burning, my mind refusing to slow down. Every time I closed my eyes, the images from the screen returned. My chest felt tight, like a hand was pressing down on it. I kept taking deep breaths, but they never felt deep enough. Some nights, I got up and walked through the house barefoot. The floor was cold. The walls felt unfamiliar, like I was walking through someone else's life. I paused outside my parents' bedroom, and listened to the soft hum of the heater. My father's slow breathing drifted through the door. It sounded fragile. I leaned my forehead against the wall and felt a dull ache spread behind my eyes. How long had this been happening? How long had she been lying to all of us? I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, hands clasped so tightly my fingers hurt. My heart beat fast, then slow, then fast again. I tried to calm myself by focusing on small things. The sound of a car passing outside, the ticking of the clock, my own breathing, nothing helped. During the day, I moved like a shadow. At work, I stared at documents without reading them. My shoulders were stiff. My jaw ached from clenching it. When someone spoke to me, I answered automatically, my thoughts somewhere else. At home, my mom acted normal. She asked if I had eaten. She reminded me about chores. She spoke in that same controlled voice, like nothing had changed. Watching her was almost worse than confronting her. I noticed every small movement now. The way she guarded her phone. The way she lowered her voice during calls. The way she watched me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Sometimes our eyes met. She would smile faintly, like she knew something I didn't. I replayed my childhood in pieces. Sitting at the kitchen table while she corrected my homework. Her hand on my shoulder when I was nervous before school. My father's laugh filling the living room. I wondered when it all shifted. Or if it had always been this way, and I was just now seeing it clearly. One evening, I sat alone in my room with the lights off, the laptop closed in front of me. My body felt heavy. My arms rested uselessly at my sides. I felt anger rising, but it wasn't explosive. It was slow and hot, settling deep in my chest. I thought about confronting her. About demanding answers. About showing her what I knew. Then I imagined her response. The calm denial. The way she would turn it back on me. The way she would tell others I was imagining things again. My stomach tightened. I realized something then. She counted on my silence. She counted on my patience. She counted on me backing down. I stood up and paced the room, my footsteps quiet against the floor. My hands shook, but my thoughts began to settle into a clear line. If I confronted her now, she would prepare. If I lost control, she would win. I stopped pacing and looked at my reflection in the dark window. I barely recognized myself. Tired eyes. Tense shoulders. But beneath all of that, something else was there. Something steady. For years I had tried to earn her approval. Tried to explain myself, tried to stay calm. That night, sitting alone in my room. My chest still tight but my thoughts clear. I made a decision that changed everything. I wasn't going to explain myself anymore. I wasn't going to defend my sanity. I wasn't going to ask her to see me. I sat back down on the bed, my hands finally still, my breathing slow and controlled. I wasn't going to beg anymore. The next morning, I began planning carefully. Every move had to be precise. One misstep and she could bury the truth again, just like she had buried me. I started with the old security drive. Every recording was copied, dated, and labeled. Emails were saved, documents scanned. Even old letters my father had never shown me were recovered from hidden drawers. I contacted a lawyer who had worked with him before. Someone who remembered what my father truly intended. I stayed quiet, pretending to accept my place. Smiling when my mom entered the room. Acting like nothing had changed. At first, it felt almost too easy. But then came the setback that shook me. One witness I had hoped would confirm my findings refused to cooperate. I don't want to get involved, they said, voice shaking. Your mom warned me about you. She said you're unstable. My hands trembled as I drove home that night. My chest felt heavy. For the first time in weeks, I questioned whether I could follow through. She had spent years undermining me. And now her influence almost stopped me again. I sat in the car for what felt like an eternity, staring at the dashboard lights, trying to calm my racing thoughts. I thought about every insult she had ever given me, every piece of control she had stolen. Slowly, the anger returned, not sharp, not violent, but steady, like a river carving stone. I reminded myself of the recordings. The proof. The truth that could not be denied. Fear had no weight compared to that. I began organizing everything meticulously. Files in order. Emails aligned. Witness statements documented. Each piece was impossible to refute. Even while building my case, I continued the act of pretending to forgive her. I nodded when she spoke. I smiled politely at dinner. I let her believe I had accepted my small, erased place in the family. She never suspected. She never even considered that I'd be planning against her. And in the quiet moments, when I was alone, I felt something I hadn't in years: control. Not over her. Not over my father, control over the truth. Even with one failure nearly breaking me, I knew the next step was inevitable. I just had to wait for the right moment. The moment when the truth would finally speak for itself. The day of the exposure arrived quietly. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting matches, just a neutral room, a table, and the people who mattered most. My father sat across from me, fragile yet alert, surrounded by relatives who had always trusted my mom's version of events. I placed the drive on the table. My hands were steady. My chest felt tight, but in a controlled way. Every eye in the room followed me as I connected the laptop and opened the first file. The recordings played. Each clip aligned with documents and emails I had collected. There was no denying the timeline, the evidence, the truth. Every lie she had woven over the years unraveled silently in front of everyone. My mom sat at the head of the table, her hands folded neatly. She did not move. Her face drained of color as the clips continued. The calm she had always projected cracked subtly, revealing tension she could not hide. People in the room exchanged glances. Aunts, uncles, my father, they all realized the depth of her deception. No one spoke. No one accused. They simply absorbed the reality that had been hidden from them for years. When the final clip ended, silence enveloped the room. My mom's eyes were fixed on the table. She did not defend herself. She did not attempt to explain. Not a word left her lips. Her collapse was quiet, invisible to anyone who hadn't been watching closely. No yelling, no tears. Only the stillness of someone who had been caught, fully, in the truth. The calm she had used to manipulate everyone for years had failed. I felt a strange sensation, a mix of relief and exhaustion, as the weight of her lies finally lifted. My father looked at me then, a slow recognition in his eyes. He didn't say anything, he didn't need to. The truth spoke for itself. My relatives shifted uncomfortably, processing what they had just witnessed. Questions would be asked later. Conversations would be difficult. But in that room, at that moment, justice was not loud. It was measured, undeniable, and complete. I sat back, my hands resting on the table. My mom avoided my gaze completely, her usual composure replaced with quiet shame. The same woman who had erased me, controlled the narrative, and manipulated the family now had no control over the truth. For the first time in years, I felt the air around me shift. The tension that had clung to every room, every conversation, every step I took inside that house was gone. My patience, my planning, my endurance, it had all led to this. No one needed to yell, no one needed to attack. Truth has a weight all its own, and in that room, it carried more power than anything my mom had ever commanded. And as I left the room that day quiet, steady, I realized something fundamental: revenge doesn't need spectacle. It only needs persistence, patience, and the courage to let truth be heard. Her silence said more than any scream ever could. And I knew she would carry that quiet shame with her from that day forward. Weeks later, I found myself alone in a small, rented apartment. The air felt lighter, almost fragile, as if the house itself had released a long-held breath. The city outside moved at its usual pace, unaware of the quiet storms that had raged inside my family. I made coffee, my hand steady now. The warmth in the cup spread through me, calming muscles that had been tense for years. I sat by the window, sunlight spilling across the table. Dust motes dancing lazily in the rays. For the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed without the tight knot of dread pressing on my chest. Revenge didn't feel like a victory. It didn't feel like celebration, it felt finished. The truth had been revealed, my father protected, and my mother confronted with her own actions. That was enough. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need recognition. I didn't even need to feel satisfied. The weight had lifted simply because I had acted. I thought about her sometimes quietly, imagining her life now, stripped of the lies she had built. I didn't want her to suffer beyond the truth itself, but the quiet shame would follow her. That was enough justice. The apartment was small and simple, but it felt like freedom. Every object in it belonged to me. Every moment was mine to decide. I realized that peace doesn't come from changing others. It comes from reclaiming your own space and your own mind. I opened the blinds wider and let the sunlight flood in. For a long time, I had been living in shadows, trying to avoid confrontation, trying to keep everyone else comfortable while my own life unraveled. Now, I could live in light, at my own pace. I thought about the past. About the years of quiet humiliation, of erased presence, of manipulated trust. And I understood that the truth had a power that anger never could. Showing the world her deception didn't make me stronger, it made me free. Even on days when memories returned, when the just tightened just slightly, I reminded myself that the exposure had been enough. I no longer carried the hiding the truth or protecting her lies. Every morning, I could wake up and move forward, untouched by the manipulation I had endured for so long. I didn't need revenge anymore, I had peace. And in that quiet, steady rhythm of life, making coffee, watching sunlight, listening to the city hum, I felt something that had been absent for years: control. Not over others, but over myself. I learned something important through all of this. Dignity doesn't come from confrontation. It doesn't come from shouting, proving a point, or forcing someone to admit their mistakes. Dignity comes from standing firm, even when you are being erased, humiliated, or ignored. It comes from protecting yourself when others refuse to protect you. I didn't destroy my mother. I didn't shout, accuse, or humiliate her in front of the family. I simply let the truth exist and I let it speak for itself. That was enough. Distance became my ally. Removing myself from the chaos, from the lies, from the control she had long exerted over me, was the most powerful act of self-preservation I could take. Sometimes survival doesn't feel like victory. Sometimes it feels like simply breathing again after holding your breath for too long. I realized that revenge isn't about power or punishment. It isn't about making someone suffer. Revenge, in its truest form, is about reclaiming your life, your peace, and your space in the world. Once the truth is known, once justice has quietly taken its place, the rest doesn't matter. Now, I wake up in a place that is mine. I move through my days without the weight of someone else's deception pressing on my chest. I have learned to trust myself again, to feel calm in my own company, and to let the quiet strength of truth guide my decisions. What happened doesn't define me. What she did doesn't define me, I define myself. And that, I have learned, is stronger than any lie she ever told, any control she ever wielded, or any attempt to erase me from the life I was meant to live.